So this isn't the main thing, I'm just gonna. Okay, I'm just gonna explain something to you guys so you have context on this and we can figure out if they're, So basically, this is kind of almost everything we think about when we think about how the industry is gonna transform itself and how you bring innovation to the industry has to do with just managing legal demand in a more thoughtful, rigorous way, which is really about segmenting demand. And so you can look at this at a really micro picture, which is at the bits and bytes level, what are the features and attributes of all the demand that makes up the legal industry, and where is it going, and how is it being serviced, and by whom, and at what cost structure. But you could also look at it at a macro level, which is, our industry actually, from a macro perspective, is very unsegmented. Almost 2/3 of the industry is spent with traditional law firms, 2/3 of the spend, and about 1/3 of the spend goes to in-house counsel. If you add up all of us, the Pangea 3s, the Axiom, everybody, the whole thing, non-traditional firms, we don't even account for 1% of the market yet, right? Yeah. And so it is actually, it has historically been, I don't even know if this is a word, a duolith, is that a word? But it's almost a monolith, but essentially in-house departments, and right? So it's very unsegmented, and there are a whole bunch of things, I could go on for hours about segmentation, but there are a whole bunch of ways in which that manifests itself, which lead one to believe that has to happen, and when it happens, that is what transformation actually is the market, both kind of the amount of spend both being reduced and reallocated. And so
you're fine.
Okay, so I'm going to make a point.
I was recording the other, just.
That's fine. I'm going to make a point here, but then the riff that you're going to want is going to happen on this side of the.
Gotcha.
Okay. But I'm just going to let you guys know how we think this ties to sort of transformation, because fundamentally that's what your question is about. So when we think about when we think about transformation, we think about this. Hold on one second, actually. I forgot to ask her to push off my phone.
Yeah.
Hey, Eva, could you let Dean Smith know that I'm just running a little late for my call? Thanks.
Sorry.
No worries.
Thank you. Action.
Right. No, so I'm just, again, this is just context, but basically, when we think about, transforming the industry or helping clients transform the industry, fundamentally it's about bringing a different level of energy and rigor to the activity of segmenting legal demand. And right now we would say very crudely that legal demand chunks out into kind of 3 broad categories: exceptional events, experience demand, and efficiency demand. And risk and cost is highest here and lowest here. And each of these come with its kind of incumbent service provider and cost to serve. Okay, so traditional law firms up here at kind of $500 an hour to $1,000 plus, right? In-house departments at experience demand from somewhere between $150 to $350 an hour. And then efficiency would be on the inside, temps and contract administrators, and on the outside, on the inside it would be paralegals and contract negotiators, et cetera. On the outside it would be temps and Indian LPOs, right? And that would be $25 to $100 an hour. That'll make sense?
Yes.
So most of the efforts historically in the industry have been, are you guys okay? I can
Yep, keep going.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Steven Spielberg over here, he'll figure it out.
So I'll let you, it's okay.
Okay, we're good.
this back. Go ahead.
Good, okay. So most of the efforts historically in the industry have been intra-segment, right? So if you think about everything people have done with law firms, convergence exercises, discounts, RFPs, right? That's all about getting more efficient within a provider set. And the benefit there is kind of, call it 5 to 15%. The yield tends to be kind of modest. Sometimes it's almost immeasurable. How do you measure a discount? You're only dealing with half the equation, right? So historically, all the energy's been kind of there. What transformation is about is actually, how do you move these lines up? You know, oh geez. How do you manage to move these lines up? By fundamentally rethinking kind of the features and attributes of the demand and what kind of service provider it belongs in. And so actually, if you go back in history, there was one transformational moment, and that's when the modern law department was created with Ben Heineman and GE. And that was a segmentation exercise because the market basically looked like an inverted pyramid, right? With very small law departments, kind of here, and all the work going out to general practice firms. And eventually GE and then others very quickly said, wait, all this work out here, that's very inefficient to be doing with law firms. We can bring that inside, and we can actually get a serious economic benefit from doing this work with John as an employee of GE as opposed to John as an employee of Cravath. And it's true, when you move work that's being done up here to down here, that's a 50 to 70% savings, not a 5 to 10% savings. And if you're able to actually drop it all the way down to here, that's a 90% savings. And again, if you can move from work from here to here, that's usually about a 50 to 70% savings. Okay, so moving work inter-segment packs a punch. That's the kind of sort of value that people are looking for. And so the very first answer to the question, how do you win, or how do you prevail, or what is it that you're going to do to actually help companies transform the industry, is you bring a different cost to serve model that is credible and viable and proficient at doing work that is currently serviced at one of these categories inefficiently. Okay, so that's sort of the first idea, and this is actually happening in the industry. It has been happening, and it will continue to happen. And actually, if we used to be in an inverted pyramid, very clearly where we're heading, across the next several years, is to a right side up pyramid, and that makes total sense because that's what every other industry looks like. And in fact, this actually explains a lot of things you see in the marketplace, because you've got law firms like Howry and Dewey and others that have either gone out of business or that are really struggling and writhing in pain and et cetera. And it's because their market on a relative basis is shrinking. It's getting more difficult. You can't just kind of cruise up here anymore. You've got to be quite good, not just at delivering legal services, but at the business of law. It's more competitive than it used to be. It's more rigorous than it used to be. It also explains why certain firms are coming down into this part of the market, like Oric with Wheeling, West Virginia, and Fenwick and West with Flex, and Eversheds with its version of Axiom, and Linklaters with its partnership with Integrion. And you'd say, well, why would firms that enjoy incredible brands up here and this kind of work and et cetera want to come down and do this kind of work? And it's because this is the part of the pyramid, this is the part of the industry that's growing. This is the part of the industry that's shrinking. And these guys know that, and they want to be relevant to the part of the growing market. And so they're trying to come down. It also explains why LPOs have been doubling year on year. They're doubling year on year because their market is doubling year on year. And so this, when you start to sort of, see this segmentation happening and this sort of way in which the market is reforming itself or transforming itself, it starts to explain a bunch of stuff that's going on. But so all of that makes a ton of sense. And this is not controversial stuff. This is stuff that our clients get. It's what they're working on. It's what they care about. But then you say, well, so what's the problem? Like, why actually is innovation so hard in the legal industry? Why is, particularly the idea of sort of change and transformation so incredibly hard fought and difficult? And it has to do not with our motivation to move to this, but our capacity for moving to that. And that capacity tracks directly to how we think about managing risk. And so I sometimes, and I'll use it here as a proxy, quality control for risk management, because fundamentally that's really what it is about. How does the general counsel or his and her leadership team assure themselves that the quality of the output is controlled in a way and at a level that they feel good about, right? So if you think about the legal industry's system for quality control, what is it? What is the way in which the legal industry controls quality? It's hire a quality lawyer. That's our approach to quality control as a $500 billion industry, as a major and important sort of, function within the corporate universe. We control quality by hiring quality people. Whether we're hiring that person at Cravath to do a job for us, to do a matter for us, or whether we're hiring that person to GE to be our head legal person for this region or for this product or this division or whatever. Let's get somebody good in place who's well-trained, who's capable, who's got the right set of experiences, the right judgment, and the right work ethic. And so, if you were to compare that with how every other industry manages and approaches quality control, it's quite different. Most other industries and functions take a systems-based or a process-based approach to controlling quality. So take finance and accounting as an example. In finance and accounting, yeah, you have great people. You've got smart people, but they work in a system. They work, in a process, in an engineered workflow that has escalation protocols. It's got checks and balances. It's got internal audits and external audits. It is diagrammable, It's a workflow, and it presents itself that way. And it definitely has smart, talented people in it. But there are processes and policies and protocols that you wrap around that to make sure you get the quality that you need in a consistent way that is verifiable and auditable. And so if you were to say, okay, well, I get that, that makes sense. How do I diagram the quality control system of the legal industry? And it just gets very silly and very sort of, simple. But you say, okay, quality control equals, quality lawyer. I said, well, is that it? And he said, well, maybe, okay, well, quality lawyer equals quality work product. And quality work product means reduced risk. And you say, is that true? And the answer is, I have no idea if that's true. It's quite logical. It makes a lot of sense. It's totally impressionistic because we don't measure that much. If we measure anything in this industry, we don't really measure anything. And so, because we don't measure anything, it is a logical statement. And the truth about that statement is, anyone's guess. But the thing is, we don't have to actually even know if it's true. Because this in and of itself tells us why we're stuck as an industry and why we're struggling to innovate. Because what we do know, if you were to take as a proxy for quality, experience and pedigree, which is how we think about quality as an industry. Where have the person been, how have they been trained, what does their skill set look like, all that stuff. Experience and pedigree is a proxy for quality, okay? And the one thing that we do know about experience and pedigree, and this is empirical, it's not impressionistic, is that it's really expensive, right? And so if you're operating in a world where you're being asked to do more with less, where you're asked to deliver more value or save money, then you've got less of these. That's just a fact. This is your new reality. This is the reality we live in. And if you have less of these, then that means you've got less of this. And if you have less of experience and pedigree, you've got less quality lawyer, which means you've got lower quality work product, which means you have higher risk. And now you're stuck as the general counsel of a giant corporation with an existential dilemma. Am I willing to increase risk in order to save money? And we were, as a group of people, put on this earth to answer that question. And the answer is always no. That's my job. That's my job. I'm here to make sure that we don't see this happen. We don't see a massive increase in risk. And so while this is important, I get it, and it's now a part of my job, it can't come at this expense. And so now I'm stuck. And so when I say these two things are in a zero-sum kind of relationship with one another, this is what I'm talking about. And so what that does is it says, okay, it forces me to say, well, if I want to save money and I want to transform myself, then where do I not care about risk? And that's down here, right? The risk and cost, this is down here. But operating down here, that's incremental. That's not transformational. That's not inter segment. That's intra segment. And by the way, the dollars are small down here. So this isn't going to move the needle. And so this isn't enough. And this is why we're stuck. Because the game is not worth the skin down here, right? But the skin, where the game is worth the skin, it's too much skin. It's my job. And that doesn't feel like it's negotiable. And so you need a way out of this. The only way we're going to move forward as an industry is if we somehow solve for risk and cost at the same time.
What's the solution?
And the solution is not a who model of managing risk, but what I think of as a how model of managing risk. And it's a systems-based, process-based orientation like every other industry. Every other industry, by the way, that looks like this, a right-side-up pyramid, because that's the way we're supposed to look, has already sort of grappled with this and figured it out. And so it is about putting the construct in place that actually yields a reduced risk posture. And that is about building the right, sort of system and thoughtfully and tightly engineered workflow. It's about employing the right sort of methodologies around matter segmentation. It's about infusing that process with escalation protocols and tool creation and standardization and automation and client self-service. And all these things that you do and you put in place, to reduce risk, also conveniently and very powerfully save money. Because when you actually put a really robust process in place, one that is supported by tools and templates, one that has escalation protocols at the right breakpoints in the process, one that very thoughtfully thinks about how do we segment work in the first place, how do we unbundle at the sort of matter level and at the task level, and kind of array work across the team in a way that is sensible and fits everybody's responsibility level. Once you do that, you enable a very different looking resource mix. Typically, one that is much less expensive, one that can operate in much less expensive geographies. And you can trust that kind of construct to yield the right risk results. Because actually, the fact that it operates in a much more disciplined, systematic way with strict governance gives you more consistent risk results in areas that are characterized by high transaction volume. Now, this is not actually going to hold up and be true in an area that is really about bespoke advisory work or that feels like counseling or the delivery of advice or thought partnership. Because in that model, this is actually exactly the right way to think about value delivery. But when you're in an area where you are doing something thousands of times, tens of thousands of times, hundreds of thousands of times, commercial contracts, compliance, know your customer, or anti-money laundering, or diligence in a big M&A context, or a contract remediation in an acquisition context, or a document review in a litigation. You're doing something again and again and again and again, and it can have a range of complexity. But there is a sort of repeatable nature to the work, and there's high transaction volume. Then this model breaks down very quickly. It doesn't actually work, and you need a different approach. And by the way, those areas, the areas that are characterized by high transaction volume, that's where most of the spend is. That's actually where you need to come up with different solutions. And so the solution that answers the problem is a construct for managing risk that looks like the constructs that have been employed in other industries, which, by the way, once you employ them, actually save you meaningful amounts of money, because it's not just about rate arbitrage or labor arbitrage, but it's about fundamentally changing the factor costs of the resource mix, but it also increases throughput and it increases productivity. Sometimes what we found on the order of 30 to 50%, and that right there, the cost is zero on increased productivity. Every unit that you can push through the system that you didn't get through doing the old way, the cost on that is zero.
Yeah.
And so you very quickly change the cost equation if you can create a construct that not only decreases risk, but increases productivity and throughput.
Wow.
And the key to making all of this work is you can't live in an impressionistic world anymore.
And how do you move from moving in that impressionistic world to a...
You have to measure everything. And in managed services, we measure everything. We track everything. So, workload by standard work units, normalized, basically, time to, cycle time to first draft, cycle time to first substantive response, cycle time to completed contract, customer satisfaction across 3 dimensions on, how that transaction went for them. Consistency of our desired risk positions. Are we getting our first choice? What percentage of time are we actually getting our desired term? What percentage of time are we getting our number one fallback? How often do we have to go to escalation? Measuring all of these things. And when you accumulate enough data, you get a very clear, very objective, empirical picture on what your performance looks like. And you can measure it against as long as you're able to measure the sample set, the comparison, you can actually then, kind of show the power of this. And so that's what managed services does and is consumed with for Axiom, is how do you simultaneously reduce risk and reduce costs. So all of our energy, all of our time, our investment dollars, all of that stuff is in areas where we believe credibly we can improve performance on both risk and cost at the same time. And then we measure, and then once we're in those areas and we're measuring everything. Because we know we have to overcome an impressionistic view of the world. And impressionistic views of the world are really, really powerful. I mean, we know that the you know, we know the earth is round, but if we didn't know that empirically, you know, we wouldn't have that impression. I mean, based on my impression, it's flat. And so, you know, so this is, you know, this is the big challenge, and this is, we think, the way that we, you know, kind of work our way through it.
It was just awesome. I can't believe we got that on film. And that may be the most important piece of footage.
I know.
In 10 years.
It's different when you talk to people who are actually doing it, you know? I mean,
Yeah, there's no theory there.
no, it's, this is great, this is great. I wanted to, if we could, just take another minute, because one of the things I wanted to ask is about, so we're educators.
Yeah.
And let me
You're
just,
asking the same question I want to.
okay, let me just zoom in, let me just, because we've reset, can you just move that marker, sorry, real fast?
Mark.
Okay, so, you know, we're legal educators, and both Bill and I are very interested, of course, in creating a very different type of law student. If you could have your pick, what do you think the lawyer that works in the 21st century, works in this world that you've just described, what do they need to know? What skills do they need that you don't see typically in even
Well, I think
what are considered great lawyers
Yeah.
normally?
Before I get to the skills part, I would say just intangibly, you know, I think the well-rounded leaders of the legal industry, you know, as we kind of look into the future, I think we'll have to have a set of skills and an understanding around the business of law. But I think intangibly that starts with a real curiosity and a passion for the, you know, the business challenges and the business problems that are presented or that naturally adhere to the delivery of legal services. And it's an area where, that historically has been incredibly underserved. I mean, sometimes when we say the business of law, people don't even know exactly what it is we're talking about. And so I think that, you know, the dimension that differentiates the legal leaders of the future from the legal doers of the future are people who not only have an appreciation for the substance of law and have built skills and expertise around their ability to practice law, but they also understand the business of law. And they understand a whole sort of set of disciplines that are important to leadership, you know, change management and, you know, and communication and, you know, and to some extent salesmanship. And
Say something else about sales if you don't mind. What do you, salesmanship, what is that?
Well, I think, you know, you've got to, I think that if you're going to lead people and you're going to change behavior, particularly in an industry that is a bit averse to change and sometimes a little bit terrified by change, you're going to have to bring, I don't think about it so much as persuasiveness or the kind of sort of prototypical sales behavior that one might sort of think of when they think of salesperson. But when I think of salesmanship, I think about a conviction, a level of conviction in your beliefs that is strong enough and deep enough that people want to follow it. They believe in it, you know? And you know, as we sort of face off against the challenge of helping this industry transform itself, one of my most important jobs is finding general counsel who are not only of the right mindset, but who actually have a great capacity for leadership. Because the greatest obstacle they're going to have to innovating, other than sort of this overcoming kind of traditional ideas about how we manage risk, is their own colleagues. You know, it's their own reports. And it's not only them, it's their clients. It's people on the business side who need to adapt to a new way. Change is difficult, and it requires leadership. And so, I oftentimes have a hard time separating salesmanship from leadership, because they're both about motivating and inspiring action. And so, we are really focused on, the importance and infectiousness of belief. In fact, we're going to have a retreat here next week, and it is completely about belief. Because if we don't deeply believe, then we're not going to be able to get to get others to believe in what we think has to happen. And I think as a company, we genuinely feel that for us to sort of realize our potential, and for us to have the kind of impact that we want to have on this industry, then we need to work with people who believe what we believe, not just with people who need what we have. And that is a bit of a rallying cry inside this company right now. We are not going to turn away from people who need what we have. But if we have our druthers and our choice, we are going to identify, we are going to seek out, and we are going to make ourselves relevant to people who believe what we believe. Because those are the people who are going to lead the transformation of this industry. And I think if I were a law student right now, and I was thinking about how am I going to be relevant to a transformed legal industry, or one that is in the process of changing itself, which is, I think, at least a decade-long process, then I am thinking hard about developing skills and knowledge, curiosity and passion around the business of law, and I'm thinking hard around developing the intangible elements around leadership and salesmanship and change management, and how do I kind of navigate in an uncertain world. And so I think that those are the things that I would be focused on, in addition to obviously developing hard skills in the practice of law. So,
What about, I look up here and this is a conversation, and components of that look like data analytics, process engineering,
yeah.
types of thing, the canonical, I didn't go to law school to do math, pathology that sits out there. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, look, I actually think the way the industry gets transformed is by companies and leaders who embrace a multidisciplinary approach. And so I don't think you need to be able to do all of these things. You need to be aware of all of them, and you need to probably on some level have a point of view about them if you want to have impact. But the way that we work, we have a solutions design team that has analysts and McKinsey and BCG and Bain type complex problem solver type consultants, and process engineers from places like Accenture, and and deep technologists, and then real content experts, lawyers that are experts in their domain. And it's the combination of all those disciplines coming together to solve a really big problem that is exciting, and that actually brings about innovation and is capable of constructing novel solutions that feel like transformation. So I don't have I have a tiny fraction of the skills that are necessary to do what this company does. But when you operate in a corporate environment, then you figure out what your role is, and you play that role as best as you can, and you attach yourself to a really good diversely talented team. And it's the combination of talents that creates a capability. And the one thing that I'm so proud of Axiom is I really think we've got the best solutions design team. Well, we have one of the only solutions design teams in this industry, but it is.
You have an R&D department.
It is very impressive.
You have an R&D department, right? So you're doing your own research and development.
Yeah, I guess so.
This is this common phrase, why don't law firms have R&D departments? And
Yeah. So, anyway, sorry, that's riff after riff.
No,
That's,
that was
that's
perfect.
exactly what we're going
That's
for.
Incredible stuff. No, it's incredible stuff. You probably have to go.
I do, I think.
This was just a phenomenally interesting thing here. I was just thinking, Joanna, she's been sitting here. I'd be curious to know what you're thinking. Can you have one more question you might want to pose to Mark?
Good, thank you. No, not really. I mean, I guess just as a law student, that's trying to enter this world.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think the core characteristics should be of the people who will succeed in this are?
Well, I think, I think it depends. It depends a lot on what people want to, what they want to do, and I think that's ultimately going to be a function of what they're naturally passionate about and how they see themselves sort of fitting in a new world. And I think what is daunting a little bit about the legal industry is that it's changing and that the traditional paths, some of them are not what they once were. And what's exciting about it is that a whole bunch of new tributaries are sort of, are branching off from the mainstream, and so there are a lot more options, and there's a lot more variety. And so if you find yourself getting energized by, figuring out how do we evolve ourselves and how do we solve some of the, challenges and problems that are, in front of the industry right now, then that tells you, well, I need to develop a set of skills and capabilities that will allow me to be effective in that arena. But I still get to stay in the industry. I'm just working in the industry in a different function. And if you don't find yourself energized by that, then you educate yourself enough about the way in which the industry is transforming itself so that you're not unaware about the sort of business risks of what it is you're going to do, and you develop and carve out a practice, a legal practice that makes a lot of sense given where the industry is headed, and there's going to be plenty of those.
The striking thing about talking to you and David and a few others, and Joanna can pipe in on this one when she went to reinvent law, is the fact that you go through 3 years of law school and you never encounter this energy, and then you encounter it for the first time and it's like a huge blast of air that you've never experienced. Is that?
Yeah, no, we talked about this at lunch, and I said for me, I became his research assistant this year, and I learned about all of this at once. And to me, when I wrote Henry an email a few months ago, I said, this just makes sense. Yeah. To me, it just makes sense to me. And I feel like it's all of my experiences together. But it's something that's very hidden. And when, I tell my classmates, oh, I want to work at Axiom, they're like, what the hell's Axiom? What's Novus? What are all these companies? Yeah. And it's just so alarming that I am literally the only person in my class out of 250 people.
Except for Jerry.
He's technically a 4.0, but I'm the only person in my class that has any idea that this is even going on or thinking this way. And I also think it's an issue
that's what this is about.
Yeah,
that's what this is about.
But aside from a few close friends of mine that we love talking about this kind of thing, and this does energize us, I don't think it's also the typical law student. I think there's a real problem with who's going into law and that no one is thinking about the business of law and where it's going.
Yeah.
This wakes you up.
Yeah.
I think it wakes you up. I think this is what a lot of young people would want to have. I think they're closed off to the sense of possibility, and that's why I'm excited.
I think this changes the dynamic of who will want to go to law school, because I think it'll be more of a business school structure instead of this traditional, archaic, we're going to go into a law library type thing. So I think it changes that also.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Hey, thanks for your time.
Hey, you're so welcome.
You're so generous, and we'll make sure you get all the deliverables so you can take a look at it.